Today we are going to learn how to play chess, the most popular enduring sport in the entire world, one of the fastest growing games in the 21st century, also known as the game of kings. Contrary to popular belief, you do not need to be a genius or a brilliant savant in order to be great at this game. In fact, all you need is a little bit of dedication and patience, and that will take you a very long way. Originally, this game showed up in ancient India over 1500 years ago, spreading to ancient Persia as well as the Arab countries. In the 9th century, this game eventually hit Europe, and from there, it just skyrocketed. 605 million adults play on a regular basis, with at least 70% of the population having at least played one game. My name is Anthony Arena. I am a 2000 rated chess expert from Long Island, New York. And today we're gonna go over how to play this magnificent game. We're gonna go over the board, we're gonna talk about the pieces, and I'm gonna show you some principles so you can sit down anywhere and dominate at this game that I love. Let's get started. What we're looking at here is called a chessboard. Notice that there are a total of 64 squares on this board. There are either light colored squares or dark colored squares. Now, not every single board will look like this. They often come with their own colors as well. You might see it as maybe red, blue. The point is, a majority of the time, they're either gonna be a dark color and then a light color. That is how you contrast the different squares. Now, you can see here on the left that there are numbers going from 1 to 8. This operates as your y-axis, and we call these ranks. Meanwhile, on the bottom of the screen, you can see here that there is an A going all the way through to H. These are called your files. Now, let's say you want to locate a particular square on the board. You can easily doing this using your notations. For example, let's say we want to find E5. The first thing we'll do is look for the 5th rank. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we will look for the E file. A, B, C, D, E. Based on this, we can easily find E5, and that is how we find our notation. Now let's put some pieces on this board. Notice here that we have 16 pieces on each side on a 64 square board. There are a variety of pieces that do very different things. So we have the pawns. There are 8 total, and they make up your front line. These are your foot soldiers. You will use them to create attacks, take space, and defend your more important pieces on the bottom. In the middle, we have the queen and king. If you're trying to figure out where to put the queen, there is a simple rule. Queen takes color. We have the white pieces here, therefore the queen will go in the light square. The black pieces follows the same rule. The queen is on the dark square. The king is on the opposite color. So queen takes color, do not forget that. Then we have our bishops. They are right next to the king and queen, followed by the knights or the horses, and then the rooks. If you're trying to figure out who goes first, it's going to be the player who uses the white pieces. However, it is common tradition to let your opponent get a turn with white as well and play 2 games. That is because of a concept called tempo. Tempo means forcing your opponent to make defensive moves. Because white is going first, there is a very slight advantage because white is attacking. The first piece we're going to talk about are the pawns. The pawns are very simple. They are the foot soldiers of your operation. You're going to use them as follows. On the first move of the game, you can move 2 squares. 1, 2, right? You can only go forward, you can never go backwards. And after your first move, you can only go 1 square after that. So for example, we wouldn't be able to go to E6, we would have to just play E5. Another rule to note is that you can't move through opponents. However, if your opponent was to play D6, as you see the notation here, we can take on the diagonal just like this. One big goal of the game is to get your pawn to the other side of the board. Notice here that we have the option to promote to a queen, a knight, a rook, or a bishop. By getting your pawn to the ends of the board, you can actually upgrade to a higher value. For example, the pawns are only worth 1 point of material. However, a knight and a bishop are worth 3 points of material, a rook is worth 5 points of material, and a queen is worth 9 points of material. So by going ahead and promoting, you immediately get an advantage. Next up, we're going to talk about bishops and knights. Like I alluded to, knights and bishops are worth 3 points of material. There is a great debate on which piece is more valuable. I'm going to explain what the pieces do, and you can let me know in the comment section which of these pieces you think is better personally. The bishops can move on the diagonals. This is a light square bishop, meaning it will never be able to go into the dark squares. It can only go on the diagonals. Now, As you can see, this bishop's taking up a lot of space, but it can never cross past this f5 pawn. If it wants to go all the way over here to the 7th rank, we would have to move the pawn up first to allow our bishop to get past. This is true for dark pieces as well. If this was a black pawn instead of a light pawn, the bishop would have to take the pawn. It wouldn't be able to just jump over the pawn. It also cannot take its own piece, so the bishop can't take the pawn if they are the same team. Knights are a bit more complicated. They move in an L shape. You go 1, 2, and then 1 over. This is the full extent of where the knight can go. Think of it more like an octopus. You see here that it can go to all these different squares, but it can't go straight and it can't go diagonally. This is the most unique piece on the board, and even though it's only worth 3 points of material, there are situations where the knight could be the most valuable piece depending on the situation. Next up, we have the rooks. The rooks are much more valuable than a bishop or a knight. Instead of being worth 3 points, they are worth 5 points, but they are very simple pieces. They can either move vertically or horizontally. Just like the other pieces, you cannot jump over your own piece. You are forced to move next to the piece. Also, if this was a dark rook, you would be able to take the rook, but you wouldn't be able to hop over that either. While these are simple pieces, they are very powerful. A lot of the times, you're going to look to connect your rooks and create a devastating attack. Finally, we're going to go over the queen and the king. For starters, we have the queen. Like I said, they are worth 9 points of material. They are the most valuable piece on the board, but they are not the most important. Let me explain. So the queen can go anywhere. They can go vertical, horizontal, or diagonally. Because of these extra moves, the queen takes up a lot more space. However, it is not the most important piece on the board. It is the king. But the king has no value. Similar to the queen, it can go in any direction, but it can only make one move at a time. It can't just jump multiple squares. But if you were able to checkmate your opponent by forcing him to not have any more moves, you would actually win the game on the spot. For example, look at this position here. You can see that the king is actually in check right now, and that means that they are being attacked by another piece and they have nowhere else to go, making it checkmate. So now let's look at an actual game. Before you play chess, you should know 3 very important principles. Principle number 1, control the center. The center are these 4 squares right here. You want to have your pieces either hitting these squares or on these squares. That will allow you to control the pace of the game. Secondly, you want to develop your pieces. Development will look something like this. Knight here, maybe your bishop here, and then you're going to castle. I will explain what castling is in a minute, but that is very important. And the third most important step, which is protecting the king. Let me show you how one such development would look. In this situation, we play d4. This is the most popular opening in all of chess. Our opponent counters with d5. We are now attacking the center together. We are both trying to control these squares. In this situation, we're immediately going to start developing our pieces. He's going to develop his pieces as well. Notice that after a couple of moves are made, we're going to look to castle. So let's say pawn e6, we can play a move where we can protect our king, develop our pieces, and set ourselves up for a middle game, and that is called castling. Castling is a little bit of a weird rule, but there are some important caveats that you should note. If there is an open path between the king and the rook, there are no pieces blocking, your king is not in check, and neither the king or the rook have moved yet, you can do something like this. The king moves over 2 squares, the rook moves over 2 squares, and now your king is safe because it is not on the center of the board anymore. Your development is complete, and you can go ahead and move into the middle game. Now, you can actually castle both ways. For example, let's say queen to e7, we develop our bishop. Our opponent can also castle, but it's a little bit different. Notice that instead of 2 squares between the king and the rook, there are actually 3 squares. Therefore, when we castle here, the king moves over 2 squares, but the rook moves over 3 squares. So it's a little bit different. Something that you should note for when you're a little bit of a higher level chess player, but this pawn on a7 can sometimes be a weakness, so it's a crucial move to eventually play king b8 in order to defend the pawn. Many people forget that while the king is the most important piece on the board, you can use it to attack and defend. If you want to learn how to actually start beating your opponents and using real chess tactics, go ahead and check out this video right here. Other than that, I'm so grateful for you. Stay classy. Until next time.